हरि ओम. ओम श्री चिन्मय सद्गुरवे नमः. ओम समस्तजनकल्याणे निरतं करुणामयं नमामि चिन्मयं देवं सद्गुरुं ब्रह्मविद्वरम्. ओम नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत. ओम शङ्करं शङ्कराचार्यं केशवं बादरायणं सूत्रभाष्यकृतौ वन्दे भगवन्तौ पुनः सदाशिवसमारम्भां शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्परां. हरि ओम्. Reading of the Holy Geeta by Param Pujya Gurudev Swami Chinmayananda Saraswati Ji Maharaj. Chapter 2, Yoga of Knowledge, Introduction. In this chapter entitled Sankhya Yoga, we get an exhaustive summary, as it were, of the whole philosophical content of the Gita. Roughly, we may say that the first 10 stanzas explain the circumstances under which Arjuna totally surrenders to the Krishna influence. From stanza 11 to stanza 20, stanza 46, we have a digest of the Sankhya, meaning here not so much a repetition of the Sankhyan philosophy, but as a word denoting the logic of thought in a philosophy. From stanza 47 to 16, we have an exhaustive though hasty sketch of the yoga of action as adumbrated in the entire Gita. From stanzas 61 to 70, the path of love, Bhakti Yoga, has been indicated, and in 71-72, the path of renunciation, Sannyas Yoga, has been slightly suggested. Thus, the second chapter of the Gita can be taken as an epitome of the entire Gita. We find in the Gita all the known paths of perfection sketched out in the Vedas, namely Jnana, Bhakti and Karma. Bhavish Upanishadic realization is reached when one has fully purified oneself by the pursuit of ritualism, karma kanda, and has spent a period of time in living the upasana kanda. People believed that these three are irreconcilable factors, and so many schools rose up and each started quarreling with all the others. This was the chaotic condition in which Vyasa found Hinduism during the Puranic age. In the Gita, he has tried to find for the Aryan children of the Vedas conciliation and a synthesis. And Sanjay said, to him, who was thus overcome with pity and despondency. With eyes full of tears and agitated, Madhusudan spoke these words. Sanjay Uvacha Tantatha Krupayavishtam Ashrupuurnakulekshanam Vishedantamidam Vakyam Uvacha Madhusudanaha. The second chapter opens with an announcement from Sanjay, which, with a few rightly chosen words, gives a complete picture of Arjun's sad mental state of desperation. His mind has become overwhelmed with pity and sorrow. The very expression clearly indicates that Arjun was not the master of the situation at that time, but on the contrary, the situation had ourselves overridden by life's circumstances is to ensure disastrous failures on all occasions. Only a weakling who allows himself to be overpowered by circumstances can be victimized by the outer happenings. Arjun, in his present neurotic condition, has become a slave of Sanjay. Not only describes to us the mental condition of Arjun, but also pointedly gives us a hint that the cracking of the inner personality of Arjun has made deep fissures into the character of the great hero, the greatest archer of his time. Arjun has been so totally impoverished within that he has come to weep like a simple maiden. To Arjun, thus overwhelmed by an emotion of misplaced pity and tearless weeping, Madhusudan, slayer of the demon Madhu, Lord Krishna, spoke the following words. Here it is to be noted that modern psychology has also observed and recorded that a tearless weeping is the climax in an attack of hysteria. The blessed Lord said, whence is this perilous condition and un-Aryan like heaven excluding disgraceful O Arjun. Shri Bhagavan Vacha कुतस्त्वा कश्मलमिदं विषमे समुपस्थितम् अनार्यजुष्टम स्वर्ग्यामकीर्तिकरमर्जुनो. The lord of the Hindus is surprised to see that a king claiming to be an Aryan is feeling so flabbergasted on the battlefield. The instinct of a true Aryan is to be balanced and equipoised in all conditions of life and to face situations diligently, compelling them to change their threatening attitude and make them favorable to himself. When life is courted properly, even the ugliest situation can be transformed into a charming smile of success. Everything depends upon the intelligent man's dexterity in steering himself along the bumping roads of life. Thus, Lord Krishna characterizes Arjun's behavior as an Aryan. The Aryans are extremely sensitive to the higher calls of life, righteousness and nobility, both in thought and action. The divine charioteer is quite surprised at discovering such an attitude of his friend, whom he has known for years through thick and thin. The mood of dejection was in fact quite aligned to the mental makeup and intellectual nature of Arjun. Thus, we have here an expression of wonder, and the Lord asks, whence comes upon thee this dejection, etc. It is believed by the Hindus that to die fighting for righteousness is the duty of one born in a family of kings, and by so sacrificing his life on the battlefield for a noble cause, he reaches and enjoys the heaven of the heroes, Veera Swarga. 3. Yield not to importance, O Partha. It does not befit thee. Cast off this mean weakness of heart. Stand up, O Parantapa, O scorcher of foes. क्लैब्यम अस्मगम पार्थ नैतत्वयुपपद्यते क्षुद्रम हृदय दौर्बल्यम तत्वोत्तिष्ठ परन्तप. In stinging, reproachful words, Krishna is deliberately lashing out at the anxiety state neurosis in Arjuna. Krishna, who was silent so far, is now bursting forth into an eloquence in which every word is a chosen missile, a pounding hammer stroke that can flatten any victim. The word "klebem" means the mental attitude of one who is neither masculine enough to feel a passionate courage and daring, nor womanly enough to feel the soft emotions of hesitation and despair. In modern parlance, sometimes friends wonder at the importancy of another friend and express their surprise with such an explanation as Is he a man or a woman? Indicating that from his behavior it is not easy to decide which characteristic is predominant in him. Emotionally, therefore, Arjun is behaving now as a contradiction, effeminately manly and masculinely effeminate, just like an eunuch of the Indian royal courts, which looks like a man but dresses as a woman, talks like a man but feels like a woman, physically strong but mentally weak. Had a deep meaning. Arjun, overwhelmed with compassion, had taken the decision not to fight and fall, was all along mustering arguments in support of it. As a diplomat, Krishna knew that it would have been useless to contradict his friend earlier when he was inspired to argue eloquently in support of his own strong estimate of things. But the tears in the eyes of Arjun indicated that his inward confusion had reached a climax. In the tradition of religious devotion, it is very truly said that, firmly believed all over the world, that the Lord in his high seat keeps mum and is almost deaf so long as we are arguing and asserting our maturity as intellectual beings. But when we come down to live and act as emotional beings, when tears of desperation trickle down the cheeks of true devotees, then the Lord of compassion rushes forward to reach the lost souls and guides them out of their inward darkness to the resplendent light of wisdom. A soul identifying with the intellect can see and discover itself, but when it identifies with the mind, it needs the help and guidance of the Lord. When the touch of the Lord's grace descends upon his devotees, it is invariably felt by the seekers more as an avalanche than as a refreshing shower of divine mercy. Spiritual grace must necessarily reorientate the heart and burn away its negativities before the spirit can radiate its sway upon matter. True to this great principle observed everywhere and experienced by every true seeker, in the Gita too, we find that when the silent Lord started speaking from the charioteer's seat, his words gleamed and landed like lightning on Arjun to burn his wrong mental tendencies in the fire of shame. Soft words of sympathy could not have revived Arjun's drooping mind into vigor. Thus, Krishna rightly lashed out at his friend with these stinging arrows of ridicule dipped in the acid of satire. Krishna ends his word treatment with an appeal to Arjun to get up and act. Arjun said, on a similar occasion, Christ said to Job, gird up your loins like a man. Bible, Job 38:3. Arjun said, How, for how, O Madhusudan, shall I in battle fight with arrows against Bhishma and Drona, who are fit to be worshipped, O destroyer of enemies? Arjuna उवाच कथं भीष्ममहं सङ्ख्ये द्रोणं च पूजार्हा वधसूदना. The motive hunting cowardice in Arjun has come to pick up a great argument, seemingly quite convincing to the undiscriminating. On the other hand, to one who has not lost his balance and who knows perfectly the art of evaluating such a situation. This is no problem at all, and Arjun's arguments are quite hollow. The war that is imminent is not between individuals, but to any personal due to any personal rivalry. Arjuna has no personality apart from the Pandav forces. The pair, namely Drona and Bhishma, is also not mere individual entities in their identification. They are the Kaurav forces. The two forces are arrayed to fight for certain principles. The Kauravas are fighting for their policy of adharma. The Pandavas are fighting for the principles of dharma as enunciated in the ancient lore of the Hindus. So glorious being the cause when the two armies representing the will of the people have marshalled themselves. Arjuna, the hero, had no individual right to accept any personal honor or dishonor, or to insist upon any respect or disrespect, while meeting the individuals who were champions of the wrong side. Without taking this total viewpoint of the situation, Arjun made the mistake of arrogating and observed the problems through the glasses of his individual ego. He recognized himself to be the disciple of Drona and the grandson of Bhishma. The very same teacher and grandsire were also seeing Arjuna in the opposite camp, but they felt no compunction, no compunction, because they had no such egoistic misconceptions. They drowned their they drowned their individuality in the cause they were championing. In short, Arjuna's egoism was the cause of his terrible moral confusions and misconceptions. I have often discussed this portion with some of the best men of our country and have found all of them justifying Arjuna's argument. That is to say, this is a very subtle point to be decided upon, and perhaps Vyasa thought of solving this riddle for the society with the very principles of Hinduism for the guidance of future generations. The more we identify ourselves with the little I in us, the more will be our problems and confusions in life. When we expand ourselves through our larger identifications with an army, a cause, or a principle, or a nation, or an age, we shall find our moral confusions dwindling into almost nothingness, perfectly lived up to only by him who has sought to live and discover his real identity with the self, which is one without a second, everywhere in all beings and forms. Later on, we shall find Krishna advising this truth as a philosophical treatment for Arjuna's mental rehabilitation. Better indeed in this world is to eat even the bread of beggars than to slay the most noble of teachers. This is fifth. But if I kill them, even in this world, all my enjoyments of wealth and desires will be stained with blood. गुरून् हत्वा हि महानुभावान् श्रेयो भोक्तुं भैक्षमपि लोके हत्वाथ कामांस्तु गुरूनिहैव भुञ्जीय भोगान् रुधिरप्रदिग्धान्. Continuing his high sounding but futile arguments due to his false estimate of himself and his problem, Arjuna poses here as a martyr of his own morality and ethical goodness. His gurus, meaning both Drona and Bhishma, are characterized as here as Mahanubhavaha, men who were the ideals of their age, symbolizing the best in the culture, who in their broad-mindedness, and courage of conviction had themselves offered many a sacrifice at the altars of the Sanatan Dharma, the Hindu science of perfect living. Such a noble man, such noble men who formed the very touchstones of our culture in that era were not to be eliminated from life merely for the fulfillment of an individual's appetite for power and position, not only in their own age but for future millennia. The world would be impoverished by the heartless squandering of such precious lives. Thus, Arjun says that it would be nobler for himself and the Pandava brothers, to live upon the bread of beggary than to gain kingship over, after destroying all the glorious flowers in the garden of our culture. After annihilating them all, elders and teachers, even supposing the Pandavas actually got their kingdom back, Arjuna points out how his noble Aryan heart would neither be able to enjoy the kingdom nor its wealth, for everything would be smeared with the bitter memories of the precious blood that would have been split in the war. Once we misread a situation, sentiments cloud our understanding, and then we too act in life as Arjun did in his. This is clearly indicated here in the detailed narration of the incident by Vyasa. 6. I can scarcely say which way or that they should conquer us. Even the sons of Dhritarashtra, after slaying whom we do not wish to leave, stand facing us. न चैतद्विद्मः कतरन्नो गरीयो यद्वा जयेमे यदि वा नु जयेयुः यानेव हत्वा न जिजीवेषामः स्तेव स्थिता प्रमुखे धार्तराष्ट्राः. The two earlier stanzas from Arjun undoubtedly indicate to us the state of perplexity and confusion in his objective mind, that the state of hysteria within has now developed to attack even his intellectual composure is indicated in this stanza. The stimuli coming from the array of the enemy lines as they touched his objective mind created therein a problem to solve which he needed the guidance of the rational capacities of his intellect. The subjective mind, split as he was within his mental personality, divorced from his intellect, could not easily come to any definite decision. His egoistic self evaluation and the ego created intense anxieties, for the fruits of the great war stood, as it were, between his mind and intellect, separating them and creating between them an almost unbridgeable gulf. Hence, Arjun's confusions are indicated here. The mind generally functions as an efficient receiving and dispatching clerk. It receives the information of the perceptions conveyed to it by the sense organs. After the mind arranges these perceptions in order, it conveys them to the intellect for its judgment. The intellect, with reference to its stored up memories of similar experiences in the past, comes to final decisions. They are conveyed to the mind for execution, and the mind in its turn issues act upon. All these activities are happening at every moment throughout our waking state, in our intelligent existence, in the midst of the objects of the world. Where these equipments are not functioning cooperatively with a perfect team spirit, the personality of the individual is shattered and he becomes inefficient in meeting life as a victorious mortal. Rehabilitation of that individual is the readjustment and re-education of the inner world. Once his personality is tuned up and adjusted, he becomes he comes to exhibit better efficiency in life. Poor Arjun victimized not so much by the external world as by his own mental conditions. Mental condition is therefore seen here as being incapable of judging whether he should conquer his enemy or by an ignoble stanza. Vyasa is indicating to us that the hysteria in Arjun was not only mental but was also at the level of the intellect. My heart is overpowered by the tent of pity. My mind is confused as to duty. I ask thee, tell me decisively what is good for me. I am thy disciple. Instruct me, who has taken refuge in thee. In this stanza, when Arjun has completely realized the helpless impotency within himself to come to any decision, he surrenders totally to Krishna. In his own words, he admits the psychological shattering felt and lived by him in his bosom. He has instinctively and correctly diagnosed even the cause of it to be an uncontrollable amount of overwhelming pity. Of course, Arjun does not realize that it is the misplaced compassion, whatever is it may be. The patient is now under the mental stress of extreme confusion and bewilderment. Arjun confesses that his intellect, Chetas, is constructed by a is obstructed by a cloud of confusions regarding what dharma and adharma are at that moment for him. कार्पण्यदोषोपहतस्वभाव इच्छामि त्वां धर्मसम्मूढचित्ताः यश्रेयस्यान्निश्चितं ब्रूहि तन्मे शिष्यस्तेऽहं साधि मां त्वां प्रपन्नम्. The problem whether to fight and conquer the enemies or not to fight and allow the enemies to conquer him, which needed an urgent solution, could not be rationally judged with the depleted mental capacities of Arjun. We have already explained the dharma and found that the dharma of a thing is the law of its being. A thing cannot remain itself without faithfully maintaining its own nature. And that nature which makes a thing the what it is called its dharma. Hinduism insists upon the Manava Dharma, meaning It insists that men should be true to their own essential nature, which is godly and divine, and therefore all efforts in life should be directed towards maintaining themselves in the dignity of the soul and not merely to plod on through life like helpless animals. And here, Arjuna indicates that he is quite ready to follow all the instructions of the Lord and maintain divine charioteer. The Pandava must also be considered to have indicated that if he, in his foolishness, were to raise doubts, even for the thousand time, Krishna should have the large heartedness, compassion, and kindness to clarify them patiently yet again to his disciple. All through the Gita, we come across many occasions when Arjun punctuates Krishna's message with his own doubts. Never does Krishna grow impatient with his disciple. On the other hand, each question, as it were, is seen to have added more enthusiasm and interest to the discourses on the battlefield. In the concluding portion of the introduction of chapter 1. 8. I do not see that it would remove this sorrow that burns up in my senses, even if I should attain prosperous and unrivaled dominion on earth or even lordship over the gods. न हि प्रपश्यामि ममापनुद्यात् यच्छोकमुच्छोषणमिन्द्रियाणाम् अवाप्य भूमावसपत्नं वृद्धं राज्यं सुराणामपि चाधिपत्यम्. Arjuna is indicating here to Sri Krishna the urgency for guidance, but for which he would be left to suffer the voiceless agonies of an inward pain. The patient is unable to explain or even to indicate, even vaguely, the source from which the pain is rising within him. This mental sorrow in Arjuna is blasting even the sense organs. Under the heavy burden of his sorrows, he finds it very difficult even to see or hear things properly. Even his indriyas, sense organs, are being blasted by the overheated. It is natural for any reasonable human being to feel an intellectual importance to solve a problem of the mind and thereby make it quiet and peaceful. Poor Arjun has also tried to his best to bring some consolation to himself through his own intellectual discrimination. The sorrow that he felt was not for the acquisition and possession of any sensuous objects in the outer world, because, as his own words indicate, he has already thought over them and found that even an empire comprising the whole earth flourishing under his kingship, nay, even a lordship over the gods, would not have wiped off his sense of sorrow. The urgency felt by Arjun, as is evident from his own words, may be considered as amounting to his burning aspiration for liberating himself from the limitations of being a mortal. All that he needed to make himself perfect was right discrimination, Viveka, and the Lord of the senses, Rishikesha, gives him throughout the divine song. Sanjay said, 9. Having spoken thus to Rishikesha, Budakesha, the destroyer of foes, he said to Govinda, I will not fight, and became silent. Sanjay Uvacha, एवमुक्त्वा ऋषिकेशं गुडाकेशः परन्तप न योत्स्य इति गोविन्दमुक्त्वा तूष्णीं बभुवः. This and the next stanza together constitute the running commentary of Sanjay, the faithful reporter of the Gita. He says that after surrendering himself to Krishna and seeking the Lord's guidance, Arjun, who was the great conqueror of sleep and the scorcher of his two foes, declared to Krishna, the Lord of the senses, that he would not fight and then become silent. I, during that period of time, had the authority to call back the armies from the field of Kurukshetra, except the blind old uncle of the Pandavas. He had the necessary status and weight of opinion for ordering a truce even at a time when it looked as though the time had slipped through the fingers. Sanjay hoped that Dhritarashtra would understand the futility of their fighting against Arjuna, who would certainly conquer the Kauravas' forces since this knotted hair warrior Gudakesha had surrendered himself to the Lord of the senses, Rishikesha, the winner of the world, Govinda. But Dhritarashtra was born blind and had grown deaf to the words of warning uttered by God due to his infinite attachment to his children. 10. To him who was despondent in the midst of the two armies, Rishikesha, as if smiling, O Bharata, spoke these words. तमुवाच ऋषिकेशः प्रहसन्निव भारत सेनयोरुभयोर्मध्ये विषीदन्तमिदं वचः. Thus, standing between the two forces, the good and the bad, arrayed for a battle to death, Arjuna the Jiva surrenders completely to the Lord, the subtler discriminative intellect, his charioteer, who holds the five horses, the five senses yoked to his chariot, the body under perfect control. When the stunned and confused ego, Arjuna, totally surrenders to Krishna, the Lord with a smile reassures the Jiva of the final victory and declares the entire message of spiritual redemption, the Gita. In this sense, we analyze the picture as painted in Sanjaya's words, while borrowing our sanction from the Upanishads. Once we agree to read this Upanishad sense in the picture as painted here by the words of Sanjay, we can discover in it an eternal truth. The ego Arjun, in its dejection, sits back in the body chariot after throwing down all the instruments of egocentric activities, Gandiva, the sense organs, the white horses are held back well under control by the pulled in reins, the mind. Then the charioteer, the pure intellect, would, would lend to the ego a divine strength and guide it to the ultimate victory over the forces of adharma with the help of the dynamism of dharma, even though the former may seem much stronger in force than the simple looking dynamism in the latter. The blessed Lord said, 11. You have grieved for those who should not be grieved, for yet you speak words of wisdom. Grieved for, yet you speak words of wisdom. The wise grieve neither for the living nor for the dead. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Ashochan Shocastam Pradnyavadanshcha Bhashase Gataso Nagatasonscha Nanu Shochanti Panditaha. When we rightly diagnose Arjuna's dejection, it is not very difficult for us to realize that though its immediate cause is the challenge of the war, his condition of mental torture is only a symptom of a deeper disease. Just as a true doctor will try to eradicate a disease, not by curing the symptoms but by removing the cause of the disease, so too here. Lord Krishna is trying to remove the very source of Arjuna's delusion. The ego rises when the pure self is not recognized. This deep seated ignorance in man not only veils his divine nature for himself, but also projects on a reality a positive misconception. The egocentric idea that he is conditioned by his own body, mind, and intellect is the true seed of Arjuna's delusory attachments and his own relations, and the consequent deep compassion that has risen in his bosom to make him so important and helpless. Grief and rejection are the price that delusion demands from its victim. To rediscover ourselves to be really something higher than our own ego is to end all the sorrows that have come to us through our false identifications. Thus, the eternal spirit in man, asserting its false relationships with his body, comes to feel bound by a thousand relationships with the world of things and beings. The same perfect principle in life, playing on the field of the mind, comes to experience the imperfections of the emotional world as its own. Again, the divine spark of life, as it often does, a false identity with the intellect, comes to sob and suffer for its hopes and desires, its ambitions and ideologies, which are the characteristic preoccupations of the intellect. The self, the body, and the senses is the ego, which is the victim of the world of objects, feelings, and ideas. For this ego belong all the sad destinies of life as well as its fleeting thrills of acquisition and possession. The ego in Arjun suffered a neurosis goaded by its own delusions and the consequent misapprehensions. Krishna, in his infinite wisdom, knew that misapprehension of reality can take place only because of a pitiable non apprehension of reality. Therefore, to cure the very source of Arjuna's delusion, Krishna is here teaching him the cream of knowledge as declared in the immortal books of the Hindus, the Upanishads. A re education of the mind through metaphysical and psychic methods is the last word in psychotherapy, which the East gave it to the world many thousands years ago. Krishna starts his entire Gita lesson with this attempt to that traditional cultural concept of education here. The great master Krishna starts his instructions to Arjun with a direct discourse upon the eternal reality. The inner equipments of both Bhishma and Drona allowed through them a glorious expression of the life principle or the soul in them. These great men were incomparable due to this divine shine that beamed out through them. In this clashing of weapons, to consider that the cultural soul of Bhishma will be wounded, or that the life of Drona, the master archer and military genius, will be ended is a delusory concept of an uninitiated intellect. By this statement, Krishna has indicated to Arjun a greater self that the ego in every embodiment, than the ego in every embodiment. At every level of our personality, we view life and come to our own conclusions about things. Thus, we have a physical estimate of the world from the body level, which is quite distinct from the emotional picture of life from the mental level, and an intellectual concept of life that is from the level of the intellect. Physically, what I see as a woman is mentally my mother, and intellectually, the same sacred feminine form is a bundle of cells. Each has its post-plasmic protoplasmic content, a nucleus that presides over all its functions. The imperfections that I see in a physical object will fail to give me misery if I successfully it with gild it with my emotional appreciation. Similarly, an object which is physically abhorrent and mentally shameful will still fail to provide me with any sorrow if I can appreciate it front if I can appreciate it from my intellectual level. Hence, that which gives me despondency and rejection at the physical, mental, and intellectual levels can yield a thrilling inspiration if I review it from the spiritual level. Krishna is advising Arjun to renounce his physical, emotional, and intellectual estimates and his grandsire and those of the whole battlefield problem, and to re-evaluate the situation through his spiritual understanding. This great and transcendental truth has been so suddenly expounded forth that expanded here that it has an Arjun it has on Arjun the stunning effect of a sudden unexpected blast. Later on we shall understand how this subtle psychophysical shock therapy did an immeasurable good to the hysterical condition of Lord of Arjun. Why do they deserve no grief? It is because they are eternal. How is that so? The Lord says. 12. It is not that at any time in the past, indeed, was I not, nor were you, nor these rulers of men, nor verily shall we all ever cease to be hereafter. नत्वेवाहं जातुनासं न त्वं निमे जनाधिपः न चैव न भविष्यामश्च Krishna here declares in unequivocal terms that the embodied self in everyone in is set on a great pilgrimage in which it comes to identify itself with varied forms temporarily to gain a limited but determined set of experiences. He says that neither himself nor Arjun nor the great kings of the ages that have assembled in both the armies are mere accidental happenings. They do not come from nowhere and at their death do not become mere non-existence, nothing. Correct philosophical thinking guides that guides man's intellect to the apprehension of continuity from the past through the present to the endless future. The spirit remaining the same, it gets seemingly conditioned by different bodies, equipments, different body equipments, and comes to live through its self ordained environments. It is this conclusion of the Hindu philosophers that has given us the most satisfactory theory of reincarnation. The most powerful opponents of this idea do not seem to have studiously followed their own scriptures. Christ himself has, if not directly, at least indirectly, proclaimed this doctrine when he told his disciples John the Baptist was Elijah. Origen, who was the most learned of the Christian fathers, has clearly declared every man received a body for himself according to his deserts in former lives. There was no great thinker in the past who had not, or any in the present who has not accepted expressly or tacitly these logical conclusions about the doctrine of reincarnation. Buddha constantly made references to his previous births. Virgil and Ovid regarded the doctrine of as perfectly self-evident. Josephus observed that the belief in reincarnation was widely accepted among the Jews of his era. Solomon's Book of Wisdom says, "To be born in sound body with sound limbs is a reward of the virtues of the past lives." And who does not remember the famous saying of the learned son of Islam who declared, "I died out of the stone and became a plant. Died out of the plant and became an animal. I died out of the animal and became a man. Why then should I fear to die? When did I grow less by dying? I shall die out of man and shall become an angel." In the latter times, this most intelligent philosophical belief that has been accepted as a doctrine by the German philosophers Goethe, Fichte, Schelling, and Lessing. Among the recent philosophers, Hume, Spencer, and Max Muller have recognized this doctrine as incontrovertible. Among the poets of the West, also, we find many burnished intellects soaring into the cloudless sky of imagination within their poetic flights. They too have intuitively felt the the sanction behind this immortal doctrine. Browning, Rossetti, Tennyson, and Wordsworth to mention but a few names. The reincarnation theory is not a mere dream of the philosophers, and the day is not far off when, with the fast developing science of psychology, the West will come to rewrite its scriptures under the sheer weight of observed phenomena. An uncompromising intellectual quest for understanding life cannot satisfy itself if it is thwarted at every corner by observed irregularities. We cannot for long ignore them all as mere chances. The prodigy Mozart is a spectacular instance which cannot be explained. To be logical, we must accept the idea of the continuity of the embodied souls. This genius wrote sonatas at the age of 4, played in public at the age of 5, and composed his first opera at the age of 7. Without the reincarnation theory, we will have to label this wondrous incident as an accident and throw it into the dustbin of chance and bury it there. Examples are often noticed but rarely recorded as evidences to prove this great theory of reincarnation. The modern world, as I said, has yet to discover this great and self evident law of life. Therefore, to an uninitiated student, this theory may seem too staggering for quiet appreciation. When Krishna declares that none of them, including himself, Arjun, and the great king, even after their deaths on the battlefield, shall cease to exist in future. Arjun, who was a typical man of as a self-evident fact, his questioning eyes made the Lord explain again this idea through an example in the following stanzas. Why do they deserve no grief? For they are eternal innocence. How? The Lord says, 13. Just as in this body the embodied soul passes into childhood, youth, and old age, so also does he passes into another body. The firm man does not grieve at it. देहिनोऽस्मिन् यथा देहे कौमारं यौवनं जरा तथा देहान्तरप्राप्तिर्धीरस्तत्र न मुह्यति. It is the law of memory that experiencer and memorizer must both be the same entity. Then alone can memory power function. I cannot remember any of your experiences, nor can you remember any of my experiences. I can remember my experiences as readily, as easily as you can remember your experiences. In old age, every one of us can remember the main incidents of our own childhood and youth. In the progress of growth, childhood dies away and youth appears, and youth dies before old age. Can assert itself in the old man. It is self evident that neither his childhood nor his youth is with him, and yet he can remember his own early days. Applying the principle of memory, it becomes quite clear that something in us is common in all the three stages of our growth, so that the same entity remembers the experiences gained by it in the past through the childish body and later through the youthful structure. Thus, youthfulness may be considered as a birth, when childhood has met with its death. So, too, old age is born when youth is dead, and yet none of us is the least disturbed by these changes. On the other hand, we feel, in fact, happier due to the wealth of experiences we have gained as the status of the body rose from innocent childhood to mature old age. Use this subjective experience of everyone in the world as a standard of comparison. Krishna is trying to bring home to Arjun the fact that wise men do not worry when they leave one body for the purpose of taking another one. This stanza is again asserting in unequivocal terms the truth behind the reincarnation theory, and thus viewed death can no more be a threat to a wise man. We do not mourn the death of childhood, following which alone, following which alone can we come to experience youth. We are confident in our knowledge that though youth is entered into and childhood has ended, there is a continuity of activities of the same one only, so that a child has now become a youth. So too, at the moment of death, there is no extension of the individuality, but the embodied ego of the dead body leaves its previous structure, and according to the vasanas, mental impressions that it has gathered during its embodiment, it gets identified with a physical equipment where it can express itself completely and seek its perfect fulfillment. 14. The contacts of senses with objects, O son of Kunti, which cause heat and cold, pleasure and pain, have a beginning and an end. They are impermanent, endure them bravely. O descendant of Bharat, according to the accepted theory of perception in Vedanta, an object of an object is perceived not by the sense organs but through them. The Indriyas are instruments through which the perceiving ego gathers the knowledge of the various objects. If the perceiver is not actually contacting the objects through the sense organs, the objects as such cannot bring any perception to him. That the same objects can give two different types of experiences to two different individuals is very well known. मात्रा स्पर्शस्तु कौन्तेय शीतोष्ण सुख दुःखदाः आगमपायिन नित्यास्तांस्तितिक्षस्व भारत. If the object while remaining the same can give different experiences, it is evident that it is because of the differences in the mental composition of the individuals. It is also observed that objects of one's intense fancy during a certain stage in one's life become a nuisance to the same individual after a time, for as time passes on, the mental constitution of each individual also changes. In short, It is very clear that the external objects can convey their stimuli and give us an experience only when our minds come in contact with the objects through the. He who can understand that the objects of the world are in a state of flux, are constantly coming into existence and perishing, will not allow himself to be tossed about in the existence or non existence of the finite things of the world. In the flood of time, things, incidents, circumstances, and environments flow up to our present from the unknown future to give us vivid experiences of varied intensity. They, in their very nature, cannot remain permanently, but out of necessity must pass on to become one with the entire past. Nothing can remain in the same even for a short period. In the world of objects, where change alone is the changeless law, having understood this finite nature of the changeable objects of the world, beginning and an end, on no occasion need a wise man despair. The list of things that are uh, or of things that are not, heat and cold, success and failure, pain and joy, none of this can be permanent. Since every situation of its own nature must keep on changing, it would be foolish of us to get upset at every change we notice. It is wisdom to suffer them meekly with the comfort and consolation of the knowledge of their finite nature. It is the attitude of the wise to go through life both in joy and sorrow, in success and failure, in pain and joy, with the constant awareness even this will pass away. The external world of challenges is finite inasmuch as it has a beginning and an end. Not only that, Krishna adds they are impermanent by their very nature. By the term impermanent used here, the Lord means that the same object which gives pleasure at one moment starts yielding at another moment pain to the experiencer. This inconsistency of is indicated by the term anitya in the stanza. What good will occur to him who is indifferent to heat and cold and the like? Learn. 15. Listen. 15. That firm man to whom surely these afflict not, O chief among men, to whom pleasure and pain are the same, is fit for realizing the immortality of the self. Calm endurance, both in pleasure and pain, is a condition necessary for the right knowledge of the true self. This is the technique of self realization, as explained in the Upanishadic lore. Based upon this fact, the one who has found in himself a mental equipoise wherein he is not afflicted or disturbed by circumstances of pain and pleasure, he alone is fit for attaining immortality. Yam hi na vyathet yantete पुरुषं पुरुषर्षुभ समदुःख सुखं धीरं सोमृतत्वाय कल्पते. Here she tells an important thing. When the transcendental truth or the eternal perfection has been indicated by the term immortality, the term is not used in its limited sense of deathlessness of the body. Here, the term death not only indicates the destruction of the physical embodiment, but also includes and incorporates within its significance the entire range of finite experiences, whereby in each one of them there is an extension experience. No experience gained through the body, the mind, or the intellect is permanent. In other words, each experience is born to live with us for a short period and then to die within us. These chains of finite experiences stretch out in front of us as the paths of sorrow and pain in our life, used by the rishis to indicate the supermanhood, indicates a state wherein the one walking the path of endless sorrows as the individual ego transcends that state to attain the infinite experience of the eternal and the permanent. Through the Gita, the poet Sri Vyasa is making Lord Krishna declare that the purpose of life for everyone is the attainment of perfection, and to evolve one must make use of every little chance. Perfection, and to evolve one must take use of every little chance in one's allotted span of life. To endure meekly with magnanimous joy the little pinpricks of life, heat and cold, success and failure, pain and joy, is the highest, highest training that life can provide to all of us. An incompetent, idler's hapless endurance of life is not in itself what is indicated here. It is especially said that the equipoise of the mind, both in pleasure and sorrow, entertained by a wise man, dhiraha, makes him fit for the highest cultural self development. That is to say, the equanimity should not flow from the dark caves of one's stupidity and inertia, but it must gurgle forth from open sunny fields of wisdom and understanding. When one understands the essential nature of the objects of the world to be finite, out of that realized knowledge, one gains enough balance for calm endurance and feels neither exalted in pleasure nor is dejected in pain. So long as we live in the body, as the body. We are not able to ignore or calmly endure the sorrows of the body. But when we are tired, fired up by a sentiment of love or hatred, we invariably make ready sacrifices of both pleasure and pain. Well, we ready sacrifices of bodily pleasures, sorrows of the body, but when we are fired by sentiment of love or hatred, we invariably make ready sacrifices of bodily pleasures. Because of my love for my son, I am ready to make any sacrifice of my physical needs so that I may give him a good education, etc. When one gets fired up intellectually by some idea, or ideology, for the satisfaction of it, one readily ignores and overlooks the comforts and pleasures of one's body and mind. The martyrs and revolutionaries in the world could with pleasure face physical persecutions and mental agonies for the satisfaction of their intellectual lives and for the fulfillment of their ideals and ideologies. For the following reasons also, it is proper that you should abandon your grief and distressing delusion and should calmly endure heat and cold, etc. For the 16, the unreal has no being, there is no non being of the real. The truth about both these has been seen by the knowers of the truth. For the series of the essence, seers of the essence. नासतो विद्यते भाव नाभाव विद्यते सतः उभयोरपि दृष्टोऽन्तस्तनयस्तत्त्वदर्शिभिः. In Vedantic literature, the real and unreal are very scientifically distinguished. These two categories are not considered as identifiables in our ancient scriptures, though they do not declare these to be definables. The rishis have clearly indicated what constitutes the real and what are the features of the unreal. That which was not in the past and which will not be in the future, but that which seemingly exists only in the present is called the unreal. In the language of the Karika, that which is non existent in the beginning and in the end is necessarily non existent in the immediate stages also. Objects that we see are illusory, still they are regarded as real. Naturally, the real is that which defies all changes and remains the same in all the periods of time, past, present, and future. Thus, in an ordinary example, when one misunderstands a post in the dark to be a ghost, the ghost vision is considered unreal as compared to the post because the hallucination cannot be permanent and it does not remain after the rediscovery of the past. Similarly, on waking up from our daily dream, we do not get anxious to provide for our dream children. That is because as soon as we wake up, we realize that the dream was unreal. Before we went to bed, the dream children were not to with us, and after waking up, our dream children are no more with us. Thus, we understand and realize that our dream children, whom we loved and tended as real during our dream, are in fact unreal. By significance, therefore, the real is that which exists at all times in the past, the present, and the future. The past is relatively real. It was, it is, and it will be. The life in our matter envelopments we know is finite inasmuch as every little experience at all the three levels of our existence among the objects with our sentiments and in the company of our ideas is finite. The body changes at every moment, the mind evolves, and the intellect grows. All changes, evolutionary moments, and growths are indicated by the constant death of their previous state in order that the thing concerned may change, evolve, or grow. The body, the mind, and the intellect are ever changing in us, and all of them, therefore, according to our definition, cannot be real. But is there a real entity behind it all? In order that change may take place, no doubt a changeless substratum is necessary for the waters of the river to flow. A motionless river bed must exist. Similarly, in order to hold together the millions of experiences at the levels of our body, mind, and intellect, and to give us the experience of a synchronized whole which we call life, we must necessarily have such necessarily have some substratum that is changeless and real, which is common to all three. Something in us remains as it were, unchanged all through our changes, holding the vivid experiences together. I just am uh, holding the vivid experience together, just as a thread holds the beads of a necklace. On closer analysis, it becomes clear that it can be nothing other than the self in us, the pure awareness. Experiences that have come under one's awareness do not constitute any vital aspect of one's own self. Life is the sum total of experiences that have been devised by the touch of one's illuminating consciousness. In childhood, I was conscious of my childhood life. In my youth, I was conscious of my youthful life, and in my old age, I am again conscious of my present experiences. The consciousness remaining the same, endless experiences come under it, got illumined, and died away. This awareness by which I become conscious of things in my life because of which I am considered as alive, without which I will have no more existence in this given embodiment. That spiritual entity, eternal, all pervading, unborn, undying, and the one changeless factor, is the finite in infinite in me, and this Atman is the real self. Men of knowledge and wisdom have known the essence, the meaning, and the implication of both these, the self and the non self, the real and the unreal, which in their mysterious combination constitute the strange phenomenon called the world. What then is that which is ever real? Listen. Know that to be indestructible, by which all this is pervaded. None can cause the destruction of that, the imperishable. The real is that which envelops everything uh, that exists, and which is the very stuff and substance of all the worlds of perceptions which we experience. अविनाशितु तद्विद्धि येन सर्वमिदं ततं विनाशमव्ययस्य न कश्चित् कर्तुमर्हति. Different mud pots, each different in form, shape, and color, may have different names according to the things they contain or according to the purpose for which they are used. Though each of them has thus a different name, yet all of them are, we may say, enveloped by or permeated with one and the same stuff, the mud, without which none of the pots can exist. From mud they came, in mud they exist, and when they are destroyed, their names and forms shall merge back to become mud. All the mud pots are enveloped by mud, which is the reality holding the world of mud pots together. Similarly, the world of finite changes is entirely permeated through and through and enveloped by the real, the changeless, and Bhagavan adds that there is no possibility of this real even for a moment ever getting destroyed even by a fraction. What then is the unreal Asat whose existence is not constant? Listen. 18. They have an end. It is said, these bodies of the embodied self. The self is eternal, indestructible, incomprehensible. Therefore, write, O Brahman, O Bharata, O Bharata. The physical forms constituted of matter envelopments are all perishable equipments for the indwelling. This self, which is the eternal factor, ever in its nature, changeless, indestructible, and incomprehensible. By the term ever changeless, the Supreme is indicated as eternal because the non eternals, by their nature, must be ever changing. Change being the insignia of the infinite. Hereby using the two terms eternal, nitya, and indestructible, anashinaha, the Lord is indicating that neither a total nor a partial destruction is possible in the Supreme. अंतवंत इमे देहा नित्यस्य उक्ताः शरीरिणः अनाशिनो प्रमेयस्य तस्मात् युध्यस्व भारत. by qualifying the eternal as unknowable. It is not, in any sense, intended to indicate that the Supreme is unknown. Here, the term unknowable is only meant to express that it is not knowable through the usual organs of perception. The sense organs are the instruments through which the consciousness beams out, and in its awareness, objects get illumined. These instruments of our cognition, whether they have sense organs or the mind or the intellect, are in themselves inert, and they can have their knowledge of perception only when they are dynamized by the consciousness, the spark of life. As such, these organs cannot make the consciousness an object of their apprehension. Therefore, in terms of our most common source of knowledge, the direct perception, the Shastra says here that the Supreme is unknowable since it is self determined, Swataha Siddha. Therefore, fight, O descendant of Bharat. This is really not a command to fight, a religion that is built upon the concept of extreme forgiveness and large hearted tolerance, as envisaged in the principle of non-violence, could not have raised a slogan of chaos or revolutionary bloodthirstiness in its very scripture, since such an interpretation is the unintentional mischief commentator of a commentator who does not read the Gita in the context of the Mahabharata. The words fight, O son of India, means that it is a religious call to every Hindu to discard the defeatist mentality and face wholeheartedly and sincerely the situations in which even field of his life all at every given moment of his existence and active resistance to evil is the Krishna creed in the Gita. The Lord now quotes two Vedic mantras to confirm the view that Gita Shastra is intended to remove the cause of samsara, such as grief and religion. It is only a false notion of yours, says the Lord, that you think thus Bhishma and others will be killed by me in the battle. I will be their slayer. How? 19. He who takes the self to be the slayer and he who thinks he is slain, neither of them knows. He slays not, nor is he slain. The self being immutable is neither slain nor can it be the slayer. Those who think that they have been slain when the body is slain, and those who feel that they are the slayers, are both of them ignorant of the real nature of the self, and hence they simply prattle meaningless assertions. That which is killed is the perishable body, and the delusory arrogation, the notion I am slain, belongs to the ego center. The self is that which is beyond the body and the ego, since the pure consciousness is the illuminator of both the body and the ego. In short, being immutable, the self can neither be the agent nor the object of the action of slaying. How is the self immutable? This is answered in the next verse. येनं वेत्ति हन्तारं यश्चैनं मन्यते हतम् उभौ तो न विजानीतो नायं हन्ति न हन्यते. 20. He is not born, nor does he ever die. After having been, he again ceases not to be. Unborn, eternal, changeless, and ancient. He is not killed when the body is killed. न जायते म्रियते वा कदाचिन् न कदाचित् नायं भूत्वा भविता न भूयः अजो नित्यः शाश्वतो अयं पुराणः न हन्यते हन्यमाने शरीरे. This stanza labors to deny in the self all the symptoms of mutability that are recognized and experienced by the body. The body is prone to different changes, and these modifications are the sources of all sorrows in every embodiment. These six changes are common to all, and they may be enumerated as birth, existence, growth, decay, disease, and death. These changes are the common womb of all pains in the mortal's life. All these are denied in the self in this stanza to prove the immutability of the self. Unlike the physical body, the self is not born, it being the eternal factor that exists at all times. Waves are born and they die away, but the ocean is not born with the waves, nor does it die when the waves disappear. Since there is no birth, there is no death. Things that have a beginning alone can end. The rising waves alone can mourn their dying conditions. Again, it is explained that, like the birth of a child who was not in existence before and who has come to exist after the birth, the Atman is not something that has come to be born during to due to or because of the body. Thus, the self is unborn, eternal, birthless, and deathless, ajaha nityaha. Having thus stated the preposition that the self is neither an agent nor an object of the action of slaying, and having established by arguments the immutability of the self, Lord Krishna here concludes the proposition as follows. 21. Whosoever knows him to be indestructible, eternal, unborn, and inexhaustible, how can that man slay, O Partha, or cause others to be slain? Veda vinashinam nityam yayenamajamavyayam katham sa purushah partha kangatayati hantikam. Summarizing what is said to so far as the law of being, dharma of the self, which indicated rather than defined the eternal, immutable reality. In this stanza, we have in the form of an interrogation an assertion that those who know this shall have thereafter no dejection or sorrow in facing life's realities. Having known the self to be indestructible, eternal, unborn, and inexhaustible, Krishna asks Arjun, how can one arrogate to oneself the stupid idea of agency? The Lord says that neither can such an individual cause someone to slay, nor himself be a slayer. In the context of the given situation, Krishna advises thus. It is interesting to note that he means both himself and Arjun by his words. If this knowledge of the reality has come to the intellectual apprehension and appreciation of Arjun, he will have no more justification to consider himself to be the killer of the unborn. In what way is the self indestructible? Here in the following verse is an explanatory example. 22. Just as a man casts off his worn out clothes and puts on new ones, so also the embodied self casts off its worn out bodies and enters other which are new. वसंसि जीर्णानि यथा विहाय नवानि गृह्णाति नरोपराणि तथा शरीराणि विहाय जीर्णानि अन्यानि संयाति नवानि देहि. This is one of the oft quoted famous stanzas in the Gita, which by a very striking example explains to us how the egocentric entity in an individual readily leaves its association with one set of equipments and arrogates to itself another conducive envelopments for living a new set of its required experiences. The example that Vyasa uses is so universal that from the Lord's own mouth it rings with a note of irresistible appeal. Just as an individual changes his clothes to suit the convenience of the occasion, so too the egocentric discards one physical form and takes on another, which will be most suited for it to gain the next required type of experiences. No one will plan to go to his office wearing his nightgown, nor will he, in his stiff collar, feel happy while playing tennis in the evening. He changes his dress according to the field where he is intending to work for the time being. Similar is the why and wherefore of death and thereafter. This striking example, which comes within the comprehension of everyone, is made use of by the Lord, so that not only Arjun but even those who are overhearing these 18 discourses, even at this at this distant time, may come to understand the idea clearly. Changing of an clothes, changing of our clothes that have become worn out cannot be a pain to any one of us, especially when it is for the purpose of putting on a new set of clothes. However, Similarly, when a mind intellect equipment finds that its embodiment in a given form can no longer help it to earn from its available environments. Finds that its embodiment is in a given forms can alone help it to earn from its available environments experiences that would facilitate its evolutionary pilgrimage. It feels that this particular form is worn out, jirna. This worn out condition of a body is to be decided neither by its stage nor by its biological condition, nor can anybody other than its wearer, the ego, decide it. Critics rise up in hosts to, however, against the truth of this stanza, and their main platform of arguments is built upon the absurd fact of young people dying away in the bloom of their life. In the observes in the observer's opinion, the individual was young and his body was not worn out, jirna. But from the standpoint of the evolutionary necessity of the ego concerned, the body was already useless for it. A rich man, for example, feels like changing his house or a vehicle almost every year, and he invariably finds ready purchasers. As far as the rich owner is concerned, the thing has become useless for him, while for the purchaser it is as good as new. Similarly, here nobody else can decide whether a given body is worn out or not, except its wearer. In short, the stanza emphasizes the doctrine of reincarnation, which we have already explained in the earlier stanza 12. On the whole, it must have definitely conveyed to Arjun the idea that death grins only at those who have no understanding, and that it has no pain for those who understand its implications and working. Just as changing of the dress is no pain to the body, so too when the dweller in the body leaves the envelopments, there is no pain possible again. Undressing does not mean that thereafter we will even live naked. So too, the embodiment self before long discovers an appropriate equipment from which no function and to for which earn for itself new sets of experiences. Evolution and change are all for the mind and intellect and not for the self. The self is perfect and changeless and needs no evolution. Why is the self changeless? The Lord says. 23. Weapons cleave it not, fire burns it not, water moistens it not, winds dries it not. नैनं छिन्दन्ति शस्त्राणि नैनं दहति पावकः न चैनं क्लेदयन्तात्मा न शोषयति मरुतः. The unseen is always explained in terms of the seen, and thereby the unknown becomes fully indicated rather than defined. For any unknown thing merely defined in itself remains as unknown as before. Similarly, here the changeless immutable self is being by the described by Lord Krishna in terms of the mutable and ever-changing world, which is very familiar to Arjun and all the people like us. In the world of change, objects come to their annihilation either through instruments of death, are consumed by fire, destroyed by water, or dried up by air. These are the various cosmic means and methods by which the objects of the world come to their destruction. All these means are declared as important in bringing about the destruction of the self. Weapons cleave it not. It is very well known that with an axe one can cut down a thing, and with a bullet one can shoot some other object, but one cannot wound water, fire, air, or space with a sword, however sharp it might be. The principle is that no instrument can heat or destroy the sharp it might be, destroy, heat or destroy an element subtler than itself. Naturally, therefore, Atman the self, the very cause of the subtlest element, space, and necessarily, therefore, subtler than space, cannot be cut asunder by the gross instruments. Fire cannot burn it. Fire can generally burn things other than the fire, but it cannot burn itself. The burning capacity of fire is the very essence, the truth within it, and therefore fire cannot burn its own essence, namely its fiery nature. Wherever there is fire, it can consume things only in space, and yet space consumed by fire in space, and yet space is never consumed by fire. Things are consumed by fire in space. If space itself cannot be consumed by fire, how important it must feel when it tries to consume the cause of space, the self. Water cannot moisten it. The things get soaked only when they have got interspersed they in interspace within themselves. A piece of bread can be soaked in water or milk, but a piece of iron cannot be soaked as iron has no interspace between with it. When the substance is one homogeneous mass containing neither other than itself to condition it, water cannot enter the substance and therefore cannot soak it. Another method of destruction observed is either through the quick effects of water in drowning, etc., or through the slow effects of moisture such as corroding, etc. Even these cannot destroy the water. The truth. Wind dries it not. Dehydration is possible by only when there are some traces of water in the substance dehydrated. Every crystal has its own water of crystallization, which, when renowned, causes the crystals to lose their distinct shapes and forms and get pulverized into fine powder. These are days when vegetables and food materials are dehydrated for the purpose of preservation. This is possible because these substances contain moisture molecules within them. The Supreme Consciousness contains nothing other than itself, and therefore annihilation through the process of dehydration not impossible, is not possible. Apart from this direct word meaning, on the whole, the stanza indicates deeper significances which are better brought out in the next stanza, where Lord Krishna gives out how and why the truth is eternal. For what reason, why, and how can we recognize the self to be eternal? 24. This self cannot be cut, nor burnt, nor moistened, nor dried up. It is eternal, all pervading, stable, immovable, and ancient. अच्छेद्योऽयं दाह्योऽयम् अक्लेद्यो शोष्यैव च नित्यसर्वगतस्थाणोरचलोऽयं सनातनः. It is amply clear that if a thing cannot be annihilated by any of the known methods of destruction of nature, or by those invented and perfected by man, then that given object must be everlasting. Here in the second line, we have a series of qualities listed indicating the truth. They are not a haphazard collection of collection of terms picked up at random and used in haste. Each word is chosen as a sequence to the previous ones. That which has indestructibility, as indicated in the first line, should necessarily be everlasting. Nitya, that is why, is thus eternal, must necessarily and all-pervading, सर्वगतः. जय श्री राम जय रघुराम